Hey guys, it's Callie and welcome back to my channel. Sorry for not posting for 8 months, I've been too busy staring at my haiku Funko Pops. We're over halfway through the year and have gone through another 2 seasons of new anime. And while there have been a lot of series that have come and gone, there's also been a fair amount of series that have surprised me with how much I've genuinely enjoyed them, so much so that a few of them have even entered my favorites lists. So, like always, I want to sit down and chat with you guys about the new series and give my honest thoughts about them and whether you should stream it or skip it. But if you're new here, hi, welcome. My name's Callie and I talk mostly about anime and animated shows with some surprise video essays thrown in here and there. So if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out the other videos on my channel and subscribe to see more. Alright, so without further ado, let's get into the winter 2023 season. And I want to start off with Tomo-chan as a girl because I absolutely love this series. It's about a girl, Tomo, who's in love with her childhood best friend and is really upset that he doesn't see her as a romantic interest and won't even entertain the possibility of it. And the show succeeds so well as a romantic comedy. You know, the characters are interesting, the romantic tension is there, and the show is just so genuinely silly and over the top, it's just a really fun watching experience. The show really reminds me of Lovely Complex, an older romantic comedy that I really loved with a similar vibe, because you have these two love interests who are hilariously at odds with both each other and their own eternal emotions. I will admit I was a little bit iffy on the show during episode 1 because it seemed like they were going in the direction of, oh, you're not a real girl because you don't wear makeup and he won't ever think of you romantically unless you wear a skirt. But the show quickly pivots from this narrative and even readdresses this stereotype thinking towards the end of the series, which was really refreshing and I appreciated as a viewer. The pacing of the show is also really well done. I never felt like the story dipped or that one episode was lagging. They also did a really great job at telling the story within the episodes that they had. Everybody knows that most romance animes only get one season, but with this series, I felt like they told the story they wanted to, and I was satisfied with how the show ended. Plus, there was a nice bonus episode to give me all the fan service and fuzziness that I was looking for. The show also gets extra credit for the opening and ending because the OP is just so fun and silly and I think really encompasses the vibe of the show. And the ending is sung by the main characters, which I'm always a big sucker for. So yeah, I'll stop gushing about this show because I feel like I've gotten my point across, but I highly recommend streaming the show. It's incredibly fun and it's definitely one of my favorite series of the year by far. The magical revolution of the reincarnated princess and the genius young lady is about, you guessed it, a reincarnated princess who can't use magic in a world of magic users, and a magical genius who both find their way to each other. And before I give my full thoughts, I do want to say the show started off strong. The main strength of the show is how it portrays character development, and the first few episodes did a really great job at building intimacy between the characters, especially the two leads. I also won't directly spoil anything, but there is an episode titled The Rainbow Magic Sword of Longing and Reminiscence, so do with that information what you will. And admittedly, I did get invested in these characters and their interpersonal relationships, but as the series went on, it started to lose me more and more. One of the biggest drawbacks of the show is its pacing. Episodes would start off in this weird position story-wise, and it would take about midway through the episode for things to finally settle and the tone to get properly set. And then by the time the audience was fully invested in where the story was going, the episode would end on this weird cliffhanger. It felt a little bit like the episodes were blue-balling you because after finally getting invested, 20 minutes after the episode started, it just abruptly ends. And while this might be good for wanting to get audiences to watch the next episode, I don't think it's really the best for storytelling. And I'm not even going into the content of the show itself because at a certain point it felt like they just kept jumping shark after shark after shark. You know, first there's a dungeon, and then there's a curse, and then there's a vampire, and then there's a military coup. And I think these story elements could have been executed in a way where they didn't feel so disjointed and actually made sense with the story. But again, I think just the pacing of all of it really sold the series short. But yeah, I really wanted to like this series, especially because it's basically Yuri, which is kind of rare to see. But the issues with the pacing really wore me down, and unfortunately, I only made it to episode 8 before calling it. I do want to finish the series eventually, and maybe watching it in its entirety rather than weekly is a better viewing experience. But based on my current thoughts about the series, I'm gonna have to say skip this one. Sugar Apple Fairy Tale is classic shoujo. It's got romance, it's got magic, it's got drama, it's got pastels. It's a show about this sugar confectionery artist who wants to become a royal sugar maker to pay homage to her dead mom, and along the way finds potential romance with this fairy she saved from slavery. I'm sorry, this is such a bad synopsis. In the beginning, I really did like this show. It's just a good classic shoujo that you watch to feel good and vicariously live through the blushing characters and inevitable drama. The main character is 15, and the love interest is this adult-looking 100-year-old plus fairy. But The Ancient Magus Bride, a show I've previously talked about enjoying, also has a child bride to an ancient magical being, so, it's shoujo, pick your poison. But the main reason the show started to lose me is that halfway through the series, they just started to repeat storylines, which really turned me off. The show had already kind of to drag a bit, and I was just really ready for a change of pace in the plot. But then they bring back the same villain in the same situation with the same conflict, and then the repeated arc lasted at least 2 episodes. Maybe it lasted longer, I don't know, I just stopped watching midway through. And I get it, the point of shoujo is to have these continuously occurring conflicts so the leads can grow closer together through adversity. But I think repeating storylines, especially with only 1 episode in between them, is really pushing it. I will say the show seems really popular. It's got a 2nd season that's currently airing, so there's clearly an audience for it. But this one, I just think maybe I'm not the target demographic for it, and while I did enjoy the start of the series, I just can't see myself coming back to it. I think it's not for me, so while it's a personal skip, if you're into shoujo and fantasy series, check it out and see if it's for you, because who knows, your take on it might be different than mine. The Ice Guy and His Cool Colleague is about this guy with ice powers who has a crush on his cool coworker. And I was really looking forward to this series because I had read some of the manga a few years ago and remember really liking it. But I think I just am not the biggest fan of slice of life anime, it just might not be for me. Because with slice of life mangas or any slice of life series, webtoon or otherwise, the episodes are usually pretty short and most arcs throughout the series are pretty self-contained and the character development is much more of a slow burn. And I do enjoy slice of life in comic form, but I just think the execution of these stories in video format isn't really my cup of tea. I found myself struggling to get through these episodes because it just felt like nothing was happening and the pace was really dragging. And I wasn't not enjoying the story and the characters, I just found myself wishing that more development would happen in each episode. I also thought the OP was a little too boring and a little bit too long, but I guess that kind of goes with the chill vibes of the anime, maybe? I don't know. Like I said, it's not bad, it's just not really my cup of tea. If you're into chill, cozy series where you can just shut off your brain because nothing is happening, this might be for you. But for me, it's gonna be a skip. So Buddy Daddies is about 2 spy dads raising a kid together, but they're just buddies. They're not gay, they're just buddies. And I started watching this show because I'd heard a lot about it on Twitter, and I am also self-admittedly a simp for a tall, dark-haired character who looks both incredibly hot and malnourished. But I just couldn't get past episode 2 because the child character was just so much like a regular child that I just couldn't do it. And I know it sounds mean, and I promise I don't hate children, but anime and media as a whole is a form of escapism. We don't read a book or watch a TV show looking for some hyper-realistic version of life. If we wanted that, we just look outside or something. The joy of media is that it takes elements from the real world and transforms it into stories full of passion, romanticism, and fantasy. Spy X Family, a show that came out last year with a similar premise, is a great example of this. One of the standout characters of the show was the child character Anya, and this was because she had all the fun, whimsical elements of a child's imagination and innocence, while also lacking all of the parts of an actual child that might take away from the story they're trying to tell. Bluey is another great example of this, as the show is full of small children, granted dog children, but children 3 to 7 nonetheless. And while the show does highlight the emotional highs and lows of childhood, it is still portrayed in this whimsical manner because the show is supposed to be about how fun it is to be a kid, and showing kids constantly crying about how they can't eat batteries isn't really going to help with that storytelling. I'm sure the kid in Buddy Daddies eventually grows on you, and one could argue that it was intentional to make her seem annoying because in reality, 3-year-olds can be a little annoying. But for me, it was just a little bit too much and it didn't really sell the series to me, or at least the time I was watching it. In the future, who knows, maybe I'll revisit the series, but for the time being, I'm gonna have to say skip. Now, I do want to end the winter anime on a high note because this anime season was a little bit of slim pickings for myself. And Bluelock was a show that I didn't plan on watching, but once I checked it out, I quickly fell in love with it. Now, season 1 did start airing last year, but at the time, I don't know, I guess it just didn't really stand out to me. But as I was starved for new shows, I decided to check it out because it had cool character designs and it was a sports anime. And I do love me a good sports anime. However, Bluelock isn't your typical sports anime. Yes, it is a series about soccer, but while most sports animes focus on teamwork and camaraderie, this show focuses more on selfishness and ego. The series is about how Japan's soccer team sucks, so in order to win a World Cup, they decide to find the best striker in the country. So they gather the top 300 amateur players and have them compete to see who will win the right to be a striker for Japan's team and who will be eliminated and never be able to play on the national team. And while I do enjoy me a good classic sports anime, this twist was a pretty refreshing take on the sports genre and told some really interesting character development that felt really unique to this series. It's really fun, it's fast-paced, it's hype. I binged all of season 1 in like 2 days when I started watching it. The only thing is I wish they had taken some more time to explain some of the elements of soccer, as usually a core element of sports anime is getting the audience familiar with the sport, the positions, and various terminology. I don't know if it was a timing thing or if they just assumed since soccer is a wildly popular sport that wasn't necessary, but I couldn't tell you what a striker is. I mean, I get it's a player who's supposed to score a lot, but I don't know where they're positioned, if they're supposed to lead with the ball or whatever the soccer term is. They also throw out random soccer lingo like, I'm gonna do a donkey kick, and I'm like, I don't know what that is, but sure, go for it, dude. At times it also did feel a little bit similar to a harem anime where each character has a specific color and catchphrase because that's the only way to remember a character when there's over 10 of them. But my small quips aside, I think this series is a really fresh take on the sports anime genre, and I look forward to seeing how many new soccer players Japan has as a result of this. Now, when you think of spring, you think of new beginnings, fresh starts, young love, and Skip and Loafer is the perfect epitome of this. It's a coming-of-age, slice-of-life series about two teenagers in drastically different places in their lives who meet on their first day of high school and the antics that follow in their daily life with their new friends. The show is just so genuinely cute and funny and heartwarming and just full of all the good little babies. It's hard to watch this show and not feel overcome with how innocent and adorable these characters are with the radiance you only have at 17. I do want to note that the main characters are actually 15, but I really wanted to make that Taylor Swift reference, so let's move on. The show did pivot from the slice of life genre as the series went on because a lot of intense drama was added at the end. And I was taken aback by how suddenly this was introduced, but again, this is a shoujo series. I should have expected something like this coming. My only complaint with this show is that I wish the drama and the conflict had been fleshed out a little bit more, as I feel like it wasn't fully resolved at the end and there were still a lot of questions that I had. But again, romance animes are usually just promotion materials for the manga because they want to push you to read and buy the volumes to get more of the series. So I get why they told the series this way, but I just wanted more of it. And I get that manga is a really important medium of storytelling, but I also appreciate how stories can be told through animation and video production. From the voice actors to storyboarding to the animation itself, producing a good anime is an art form. But that's a tangent for another time, so let me just wrap this up by saying I genuinely love this anime. It was so cute and heartwarming in a way that I haven't seen from a series in a good long time, and I can't recommend checking it out enough. I do plan on reading the manga eventually, but until then, I'll be holding on to hope for a second season of this masterpiece. Why Raeliana ended up at the Duke's mansion is about a woman who was pushed off a building in her previous life and is then reincarnated into a dating game where she's the villain and is destined to die again soon. You know, classic isekai. And I wasn't planning on watching this series originally, but the comments mentioned about how this was an adaptation of a webtoon, and people were really raving about how good the webtoon was, so I decided to check it out. And I wanted to like the series, I really did. Or, I take that back. I did like the series. I mean, I got invested enough to finish all the episodes. But in the beginning, I really got into the show because it seemed like it was going to be a darker take on the reincarnation trope, and it really gave the impression that it was going to be dramatic and gritty. But as the show went on, I felt like I just kept waiting for the series to hit its stride, and that just never happened. Like I said, producing a good anime is an art within itself, and I just don't think the writers did a great job at adapting the web series for a video format, or at least that's what I'm going to assume. The show just went in so many directions that it was so hard to tell where they were going with the story. The first few episodes in the OP portray it as this action mystery drama, and that it's going to be more than just an Otome reincarnation series. There's a murder she's trying to find, her life is on the line. But it feels like the writers lost track of that throughout the series, as I kept waiting for these plot points to become more serious and all tied together, but there was never really any payoff for them. Like, they mentioned she's good with a gun, but that never comes back. And then there's this thing with a ghost and she might be cursed, but that's never touched upon again. The story continuously pushes these quote-unquote serious plot lines, but don't give them enough context as to why the audience should care about them or why you should get invested. So a lot of the time you just feel a little bit lost watching. And maybe if they cut out a few of the plot lines that literally were never brought up again, it would have allowed more time to actually build up the storylines that did matter overall. And I'm sure in the webtoons these plot points make sense, and maybe it's even a subtle nod to the fans of the OG content, but to someone who is going into the series blind, it just felt like a lot of white noise in a series that was already kind of confusing to watch. I also want to recognize that it is difficult to adapt a show from comic form to video form. One of the creators of the Filipino animated adaptation of Trece mentioned how that in comics you can easily go from one scene to another with just the flip of a page or a panel. But in animation, you need to set up a scene, you need to properly introduce characters, there's just a lot more that you need to do in order to tell a comprehensible story. And I think the show could have benefited from some extra time storyboarding, editing, and just revisiting how they were using the shots that they had, so they could have told the story they wanted to more efficiently. Another thing about the show is that the animation and some of the artistic choices were a bit questionable at times. I don't know if they just ran out of time or out of budget, but some of the animation is just weirdly uncanny valley or straight up awkward to look at, which really takes you out of a scene. They also do this thing where they focus on shots for way too long, and I know that it's in order to avoid animating extra frames, but again, it just really breaks up the pacing. Oh my gosh, I also forgot. They do this weird thing where if you're a side character, you just don't have a face. You're just this menacing shadow creature. And I will say they do commit to the bit, they do it throughout the entire series, so at least they followed through with it. But I get that you have to cut production costs somehow, but this method of doing it just makes scenes feel empty, unrealistic, and a lot of the time, a little bit creepy. Like I said, I didn't dislike the series. I think at its core, it's a really good story with some great characters, but the execution was lacking in several ways that really took away from the overall story. I'd still check it out if you're interested, but I would say just kind of go in being aware of all of these things. Now again, spring is the season of love, and boy were we blessed with not just one, but two amazing romance series. I was so excited for my love story with Yamada-kun. I've been following the manga for years, and I could not wait to see this cute story animated. It's about this girl, Akane, who, after being broken up with, becomes closer with her guildmate and #GamerGod Yamada, and follows their love story as they get to know each other better and build their relationship. And I knew that this series was going to be good because I already love the manga, but the show is just a really well-made anime. The voice acting is incredible. I think the voice actors were perfect for all the characters. The OP and ED feel perfect for the series, and the whole thing is so beautifully animated and just really enjoyable to look at. You can tell that the animators really put a lot of love and effort into every scene and even got a little bit innovative with some of the transitions. Although, to be fair, these transitions were sometimes a bit distracting from the story. But, I'd rather have a series where animators seem to be having fun and experimenting than a series where they're just going through the motions. It'd also been a while since I had experienced the start of the series and Yamada and Akane's relationship, so it was really refreshing to experience it again and relive all of the heartwarming moments that had me screaming into my pillow when I first read the series. But from the beautiful animation to the chemistry between the two leads to the banter of the supporting cast, this was definitely a standout of the season, and I can see this becoming one of the classics amongst romance animes. So I highly recommend checking it out and joining me in the delusion that we'll get a second season of this wonderful show. Now, my dark horse of the season would have to be Mashle, Magic and Muscles. And admittedly, I only checked out the series because the title sounded ridiculous, but I couldn't be happier that I did because boy was this show a fever dream in all the best ways. It's about this guy who can't use magic in a world of magic users, who must fake his way to the top of the School of Magic in order to save both himself and his father. Sounds basic enough, right? Well, the twist is that in order to trick everyone into thinking he can use magic, Mashle just uses pure brute force to fight his way through any conflict. And it's just so funny. Like, maybe I have the humor of a teenage boy, but there's just something so silly about watching these bosses have these serious conversations, and this guy just straight up punches his way through whatever in front of him. Like, it's just really goofy, silly fun. And it really is just shonen in its purest form, you know? It's got the hype of Jujutsu Kaisen. It's got the villains and conflict of Dragon Ball Z. It's got the dumb humor of Mob Psycho 100. And it's got the pure ridiculousness of Skate the Infinity. The soundtrack is also amazing. Like, I think part of the reason the battle scenes feel so hype were largely because of how catchy and energetic the background music was. Honestly, all the music in this series was incredible. The OP is this really fun, like, emo pop punk anthem, and the ending is this super goofy and silly little dance along number. The show is just a really good watch from start to end. I will say though, because it is like a classic shonen, the girl characters do leave a little bit to be desired, as they pretty much only exist to fawn over or trick the boy characters. There's also this guy who sometimes exhibits incel adjacent behavior, but for the most part, whenever he's not making this face, he's fine. But even though the girl characters could have been fleshed out a little bit more, I did really like the main girl, and I feel like they really committed to the bit with her and all of her tropes, and I just really found her very fun and enjoyable to watch. The whole thing just reminds me of Saturday morning cartoons, you know, you'd wake up, have breakfast, and then just sit down to watch some fun little shows. But yeah, I just really enjoyed this series. It checked all the boxes for me, and I feel like the show can be enjoyed by viewers across all ages and fans of all genres because it's just a fun little fighting show. So again, highly recommend checking it out, and I absolutely cannot wait for the second season to premiere next year. But yeah, that'll do it for this video. If you guys liked it, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And as always, let me know what you guys think. I talked about a lot of shows, and I always like hearing what other people think of series, or if there's an anime from this year that I didn't mention that you really enjoyed, comment it below so I can check it out. A few series that are on my radar but I just didn't have time to check out were Trigun, the second season of The Ancient Magus Bride, and Mobile Suit Gundam, The Witch from Mercury. Trigun I didn't have plans on watching, but animation Twitter really fell in love with it, and my timeline is still being flooded with fan art from the series, so I feel like I kind of have to check it out eventually. I also do have plans to watch the new Ancient Magus Bride, but I just really wanted to rewatch the first season to remind myself what happened, and I just forgot how many seasons are in episode 1, so I'll get to season 2 eventually, and I hope that this time they have an actual OP because the show deserves it. And for Mobile Suit Gundam, I really don't know anything about the series, but again, I've been seeing a lot of great fan art about it, and people have been praising it for its Yuri elements, so I definitely have that on my watch list. But yeah, that's really all I have for you guys this time. I know that I've been pretty absent with posting, but I've just kind of been living life off the internet. I do want to get back to posting more regularly, and now that my life is a little bit more settled, I am going to make more of an effort to work on this channel and other creative content that I want to make. So I hope that some of you stick around and see where this channel can go. As always, thank you guys so much for watching my videos. It means so much to me, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye! There have been no airplanes all day, but now that I decided to record, there's 100 of them.